Hello, everyone, and welcome to Letting Everyone Talk Safely on World Mental Health Day 2020. My name is Jetha Devapura, and I'm honored that you could join us today. It's a beautiful day here in Melbourne. Now, this forum is about understanding ways we can allow people to feel safe to talk about their mental health. Now, when we refer to mental health here, we will talk more broad terms to include how we feel, whether it be happiness or sadness or frustration, feeling down or anxious, to all the way to mental illness and suicide ideation. Now, when we do this because we believe that our feelings do matter, and we want to acknowledge that our feeling down, if not addressed, can lead to more serious issues like mental illness. Now, we will talk about the barriers that stop us talking about our mental health, especially when it comes to mental illness. And we will go through the talk strategies of the Let's Talk program to provide some guidance on how to approach and support someone in distress, including yourself. And most importantly, we do encourage you to ask questions on the live stream, and we will do our best to answer them. Now, today, I have three very special guests who have joined us to share their experience and wisdom on mental health. Firstly, she's joining us all the way from Norwood, Massachusetts in the USA. She is a clinical psychologist, TEDx speaker, and author of 3 award-winning books, and runs a psychology practice in Norwood, Massachusetts. Dr. Beth Kurland, welcome to the forum.
Thank you so much.
It's nice to have you here. Now, Massachusetts, roundabout, it's Friday, right?
Yeah, it's 7 p.m. here, pitch black.
7 p.m. Friday.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, Beth, you got something fantastic to look forward to. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Melbourne, okay?
Wish I could be there.
Next, we have a young entrepreneur who began his career at Yarra Valley Psychology as an unpaid volunteer when he was just 24 years old. And now, I'd say almost 6 years later, he's the CEO of the company, which has grown into an organization that spans 4 clinics, staffed by around about 40 team members. Daniel Killey, welcome back to the Let's Talk Forum.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome, mate. Good to see you here. And then we have a clinical psychologist who has worked in both public and private sectors for almost 3 decades. Now, he specializes in mental health and associated physical health issues like chronic pain. He's the senior clinical psychologist and clinical supervisor, by the way, at Yarra Valley Psychology. Greg Troup, welcome to the forum.
Good morning. Hello to everyone.
Good to have you, Greg. Now,
Thank you.
Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the people watching this broadcast who are going through challenging times, personally or as a carer. I'd like to acknowledge the people who are challenged by mental illness and also those thinking about suicide. We can only imagine your challenges, and I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge your courage, your compassion and commitment to join us on this forum today. Now, please reach out if you need support. Please reach out to your own crisis support services in your country. Please call the numbers provided for Lifeline, Beyond Blue, and Kids Helpline if you're here in Australia. Now, to ensure we provide the best value and some practical tips for you on how to engage with someone in distress and provide a safe environment to talk about their mental health, we have structured our discussion around the talk strategies of the Let's Talk program. So I'd like to share with you a simple slide which talks about, or briefly overviews of the Let's Talk program, which is developed for everyday people who have a simple yet structured approach to a conversation with someone in distress, with care and with confidence, and to support them through their mental health concerns. Now, Let's Talk is 2 acronyms. Letting Everyone Talk Safely is Let's, which is really the vision of the program, and Talk are the 4 strategies, which is T for tell when someone's in distress, and engage in a conversation. And we'll talk about that today. A is for acknowledge the concern and the person with gratitude. We know how that important acknowledging is. and alpha listen to help them externalize their concern and get to the bottom of their concerns, and also keep in touch. So important after talking, and also referring to support services as required. Now, the first we will talk about the tell, which is tell when someone is in distress and engage in a conversation. Now, people ask me, Jetha, what is the best way to engage in a conversation with someone in distress? They could be sad, angry, worried, frustrated, withdrawn, or they may have a mental illness. My advice is very simple. Be mindful of the telltale signs and engage with genuine concern. Seeing the telltale signs of distress can be as simple as observing what we see, what we hear, what we already know, and what we feel. Now, after all, we have been given these wonderful assets and processes, we call senses, and so let's use them to help ourselves and to help someone we care about. So, for example, if you see the telltale signs of worry in someone, we can simply ask, hey, I noticed you looked a bit worried today, which is not your usual self. Would you like to talk? Or simply you can ask, hey, I hear you're worried. I know that you're worried, or I feel that you're worried. Would you like to talk? Now, that sounds simple enough. However, we all know that it's not that simple to be aware or even acknowledge our own telltale signs of distress, let alone someone else's. There is some key elements we're going to talk about today that influence us to feel safe, to open up and talk about our mental health, and also approach someone to talk about theirs. These are trust, vulnerability, stigma associated with mental illness, and also being mindful. Now, some of these can be real barriers to open up and have those difficult conversations, but some of these can really empower us to talk about our mental health concerns. Now, Beth, I'm going to start off with you, as I know you're passionate about mindfulness, and you are the author of 3 award-winning books. Can I mention them? Gift of the Rain Puddle, The Transformative Power of 10 Minutes, and your latest book, Dancing on the Tightrope, which is transcending the habits of your mind and awakening your fullest life. Now, Beth, they say we need to put on our own oxygen mask before helping others. How can we engage with our own feelings and fears? Because sometimes we really can be our own worst critic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that's really common that I come across is people experiencing different emotions of distress and saying to themselves, gosh, that's so stupid that I'm feeling this way, or what's wrong with me that I'm feeling this, or I shouldn't be feeling this. And so I think that's such an important question of how can we really approach ourselves. Really, I think what it comes down to is with self-compassion. And so I think about the work of Kristin Neff, who's a psychologist here in the US, and she talks about 3 components of self-compassion. And the first component is mindfulness. And so it's really being able to observe our own suffering, our own distress from a non-judgmental stance. And to give an example of what that might sound like, kind of comparing and contrasting these two, and I'm just going to make a statement and notice how this feels, and then I'm going to say it slightly differently. But if you were to say to yourself, I'm so anxious, what's wrong with me? And just notice how that feels in your body.
Yeah.
And then from a more mindful, aware place, being able to observe and say, I notice that I'm feeling a lot of anxiety in my chest right now. And I notice that I'm having some of these judgmental thoughts about what I'm experiencing. So just that noticing, being able to step back and see what's happening inside of us, and taking that half step back gives us a little bit of space in which we can hold our suffering with a little bit of greater ease. So that's the first piece, is this mindfulness. And the second part of self-compassion is this idea of common humanity. And, I think that when people are struggling with whatever kinds of mental health issues, they often feel, and we all can feel really alone in our challenges. And so it's really being able to have this sense to remember that we're really this is part of our human condition, that we all suffer, that we all struggle at times, that, mental health challenges, that millions and millions of people are experiencing these kinds of things. And so reminding ourselves, I am not alone. And then the third piece of the self-compassion is to really show self-kindness versus that self-criticism. And so being able to, even if it's just, sometimes putting a hand on one's own heart can actually help to calm the nervous system, and just recognize this is a moment of difficulty, and what might I do for myself right now, or how can I seek help, or how can I support myself? And so just thinking about how we might treat a good friend, and can we use some of those words towards ourselves?
So much wisdom there, Beth, in that answer. Self-compassion. I love that. I love it. I openly talk about when I was diagnosed with OCD, a mental illness, about 20 years ago, and how the word compassion came to me, and that's part of the 3C's foundation, compassion being the middle one, is about how important it is not to be so hard on yourself, and for those people who are listening today, please take a moment to have that self-compassion, as Beth said. Dan, thank you, Beth. Dan, I'm going to come to you about vulnerability. Now, vulnerability plays a huge role in taking that first step to open up and talk about our health issues. And one of my favorite quotes from Brené Brown is when she says, vulnerability sounds like the truth, feels like courage. Now, truth and courage ain't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. So many people are afraid to speak up, especially when it's their mental health. What stops people from being more vulnerable, Dan, to talk about their mental health?
Well, just touching on what Beth was saying before, that's the idea of mental health. Well, I like to think of them as like mental health monsters. One of the biggest lies that they make you feel is that you're alone. And if you're alone, you're definitely not going to want to feel like being vulnerable. But so I just think it's a really poignant topic that she brought up. But in terms of what stops people from being vulnerable about their mental health, I think there's a lot of things that can influence that. What comes to mind for me are things like feeling judged by the people that you might want to be vulnerable around, wanting to feel like mental health, those things, you want to keep them private, or just straight up feeling really uncomfortable, because it is a really uncomfortable to expose your vulnerabilities to anyone. But you can't really, I guess, change that these things might feel uncomfortable, or how other people might react. But it's a bit of a challenge. And in fact, it's that challenge to do that which makes opening up about your vulnerabilities such an amazing strength. But what you can do, I think, at least on a really practical way, is try to mitigate those feelings, or that idea of making yourself vulnerable is also the same as exposing yourself, which isn't always true. I think first I would say identifying how or where your mental health is impacting your world in a practical way, and then using that information to identify people in those areas in your world that are being affected, that you can both trust, who can actually also meaningfully contribute to supporting you or contributing to your life in those areas that are being impacted. So I guess, for example, like not just a boss, but a trusted boss, or a trusted colleague, or a trusted manager, because they have influence over an area of your world that might be getting impacted by your mental health. Or if your social life is being impacted, I would reach out to a trusted friend. And I'd say that because in that way, you're both making sure that you're safe in exposing your vulnerabilities, whilst also making some like real practical progress to improving your quality of life. But the whole point of that is trust is really key. Both being able to trust yourself, as well as the person that you're exposing your vulnerability to being trustworthy.
Yeah. Great, Dan. I mean, trust plays a foundational role, and let's talk about trust. Actually, Greg, trust plays a foundational role for people to feel safe, psychologically safe, to talk
Yes.
about to someone about their worries, anxieties, and we know that communication, especially how we communicate and the intent of our communication, plays an important part in building or breaking trust. How important is trust for someone with a mental health concern to open up and talk?
Yes, I think it's very important, Jetha. And Daniel touched on that to quite a good extent there. When we feel that we want to open up to someone, we can feel that we want the information kept confidential, that it can be very personal. We can be concerned about being judged or embarrassed. And so trust in terms of who we might open up to is very important. And so that sort of leads to a person who's thinking about opening up about mental health issues to maybe looking around for someone that they can trust, whether that's a family member or someone, a colleague at work, or an anonymous service, a phone support service, something like that, or a professional. Finding someone that you trust is very important because, as Daniel mentioned, if we're feeling vulnerable, then opening up to someone is going to be very hard if that person isn't trustworthy. The other thing is from the perspective of the person who's being opened up to, the person who's being trusted, and we've touched on that a little bit already. If someone is coming to you, trusting you with very personal and private information, then we can pretty much assume that they don't want that information to go any further, unless, say, it was an emergency or something like that. But being a trusting person is also about ensuring the person who's trusting you to feel that you're not going to be judgmental.
And there's an element of confidentiality. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That the information is confidential.
Yeah.
And that you're going to be there to listen to them.
Yeah. And in fact, there was a question from the audience about confidentiality. And
yes.
In the Let's Talk program, we talk about people who says, "Hey, Greg, I'll tell you, but please don't tell anyone. Keep this a secret," And how do we sort of approach that? And because that sort of puts a burden on the person who's listening to go, "Whoa, I need to keep this a secret," and especially if it's something serious, they're going to harm themselves or others. So I always say not to ever promise secrecy, but to promise advocacy. So, if example, Greg, if you say to me, please don't tell anyone, keep this a secret. What you've told me is not tell anyone, and anyone doesn't have to know, but someone could help you, if you know what I mean. Anyone doesn't have. So I always encourage people to say, look, yes, let's keep this confidential, just between you and me. Not everyone has to know, but let's bring in the people, as we agree, you and I, to help you. Is that okay? And it could be a simple thing like that, which really builds, it still ticks off the box for confidentiality, but also builds trust.
Yes. I think
Fantastic.
offering the opportunity to tell someone else is important.
Correct.
So a person might have said, keep this secret, but as the listener, we can say, well, maybe it would be helpful for us to share this with someone else.
Fantastic.
Or for you to speak to your doctor about it or something.
I really agree with what Greg's saying there, but also with that, I've always found it really useful to use collective language. So when for example, if someone has said to, especially a professional, that they want to hurt themselves or they want to do something that requires you to break confidentiality, to use language that's collective, like, hey, we should do this, or what can we do about this, or let's go through this together. It makes the person feel a lot less like they've been busted, or that you're betraying their trust, because it's hard to betray someone's trust when you're doing it with them.
Absolutely. Let's go to the next slide. I want to talk about acknowledging, because Tell was all about being mindful, building trust. We talked about trust, engaging your vulnerability to engage with the person and start that conversation. The next is acknowledge the concern and the person with gratitude. Beth, can I come to you with this one? How does acknowledging someone, including ourselves, who are going through distress, make a difference to encouraging us to open up and talk?
Yeah, I think that, I'm thinking in the 25 years that I've been in practice, I feel like what I've seen is that we're all more alike than we are different. And one of the common things that I think we experience as human beings is we all want to feel seen and heard, and listened to. We're hardwired for connection. And so to be able for somebody to acknowledge when somebody's in distress. And I think part of that acknowledgement, there's two pieces to it. One is, really being present, giving somebody one's full presence, and being able to give a message such as, I see your pain and I'm here. So, I'm sorry that you're suffering. How can I help?
Yes.
Or that sounds difficult. Would you like to tell me more? Those kinds of statements are really then acknowledging. And what it does is it really creates, I think, a feeling of safety for that person, that not only am I not being judged, this person is not, they're not judging me, but they're showing care, they're listening to me, they're seeing that I'm in pain or distress, and they're being present with me. So I think that can be so powerful. And interesting research, when we acknowledge our own difficulties, just even by naming our emotions, even just naming our emotions down regulates the amygdala, the part of the brain that is responsible for this fight or flight response that turns on the threat, the alarm system. And so that kind of even acknowledging to ourselves what we're feeling can just help kind of calm the nervous system. So I think there's something really powerful in the acknowledging, and helping.
And it actually validates what the person has said, right, Beth?
Yeah, and so I think validation is the other piece that's really important in the acknowledging. This idea of somebody really feeling heard, and so interesting. There was, and I'm just going to refer to a study here. There was a study done in March of this year at Penn State, in the U.S., and it's called "Validation May Be the Best Way to Support Stressed Out Friends and Family." And in this study, and I won't go into the details, but they looked at what kind of messages are most helpful when people experience a difficulty. And they had two kind of messages. One is a high person-centered message. An example of that would be somebody having just experienced a bad argument, and the person saying, disagreeing with someone you care about is always hard. It makes sense that you would be upset about this. So that's a validating statement. That's validating what the person's feeling, versus a more low person-centered message, which was, nobody is worth getting so worked up about. Stop being so depressed. Right. So that kind of message doesn't validate in the same way. Or somebody who might say, I feel like a failure. And maybe an invalidating message might be, oh, that's ridiculous. You shouldn't feel that way. You're so successful.
Yeah.
But a more validating message might be, this sounds like this is really difficult for you right now. I'm sorry that you're going through this. I wonder if you want to share more about what that's like. Yes. So validation can really help people to feel safe, I think, heard, and then give the space for them to then open up and share a little bit more.
Brilliantly said. I noticed a question about, can sharing one's story, while listening help? Let me come back to that question. It's a really good question, actually. Let's talk about that when we talk about listen. But Greg, can I come to you with the next question about, now in the Let's Talk program, we encourage the listener to acknowledge a character strength the person has demonstrated to open up about their concern. For example, if you share a concern with me, I could say, hey, Greg, I really admire your courage to talk to me about your concern. Thank you for trusting in me. Greg, how does acknowledging character strength make an impact on opening conversations and making them feel safe?
Yeah, thanks, Jetha. I think acknowledging character strengths is helpful for a few reasons. One is it shows that you're tuning into what the person is saying to you. So
yeah,
there can be obvious strengths like great at sport or academically, but there are other strengths like courage, perseverance,
yes,
patience. And I think sometimes people go about their daily lives and these aspects of themselves aren't often noticed or acknowledged by others. It's just
yes,
seen as who they are. So if you're really tuning into a person, it can be helpful to be listening for areas where they're showing strength. And to be able to say something like, yeah, as the example you gave, say to something that was a really brave thing you did in that situation. So it's like acknowledging a strength and also validating.
absolutely.
So sort of combining the two. And the other
Yeah.
thing is by acknowledging a strength, we talked about this at another time, is in some ways you're looking at encouraging more of it. So if a person is showing patience, persistence, courage, those things that we regard as positive behaviours, then
Yeah,
we're looking at encouraging that to happen more if possible.
absolutely. It really encourages your superpowers to even grow. And from a neuroscience perspective, that studies have shown that a simple expression of gratitude or appreciation in this case makes you, the person giving it, and the other person receiving it, much happier and healthier. It has shown that two parts of the brain, your hippocampus and amygdala, your emotion, that really regulates emotions, memory, and also some of the bodily functions gets activated with these feelings of gratitude. So when we express and receive gratitude, or as you said, Greg, I love your bravery, and move the attention from our problem to a solution, our brain releases these wonderful things called dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, these neurotransmitters that makes us really feel good. And also it shows it to reduce hormone cortisol, which produces stress or increases stress. So I think our first response after someone has just opened up about their grief, anxiety, worry, mental health issue, because when you respond with gratitude and acknowledging them, it will surely give them a boost to their self-esteem and also help them to shift their focus from the burden, I guess, to the blessings they have, and including the person in front of them, which is you who's given it, because you have taken that time to acknowledge them with gratitude. So yeah, I think acknowledging with gratitude really does help. I want to come to that question about sharing our stories. So just want to show the next slide of listen. Listening is really to help externalize our concerns. Now, at the best of times, listening can be a tough gig for most of us. So Beth, many people understand listening as doing nothing, or maybe feel that they're not doing enough. Are they really not doing enough, Beth?
I think, Jetha, that listening can actually be a very active process when it's done well, when it's done mindfully. Our minds actually tend to wander much of the time. And even when we're having conversations with people, we often can be thinking about something else, what we have to do. We're not always really here. So when we can really be present and truly give somebody that space where we're just giving them our undivided attention, I think there's something that is quite powerful and even at times can be healing in
Yes.
somebody having that kind of a space. Sometimes it's hard to do because when we hear somebody in pain, we may want to jump in. We may want to try to fix it. We may have a solution. We want, well, here, try this, or I know what you can do. And that isn't always so helpful at that first response. Sometimes it's just the listening, nonverbal communication, really showing somebody through your facial expressions, through your body gestures, whatever it is that you care, that you're receptive. Those can be really powerful. I think thinking about talking less and listening more, so it's kind of having that equation, being more of the listener, can be really helpful. And just from my own personal experience of being in a group this past year where everybody took turns, it was kind of a mindfulness course that we were doing, and we would just take turns and go around and share what was going on in our lives, and everybody else would simply listen and not say a word. And I can tell you that was just so powerful and so helpful and supportive, just to know that kind of presence. So yes, I could think it can be extremely important to be able to offer people that.
Yeah, and coming to that question we had from the live stream about sharing stories. So what you're saying is, look, it is okay to share stories, but maybe not at the front end. Maybe let them talk first, right?
Yeah, I think that's a helpful way to think about it. And there's no right or wrong absolute. So, but I think on the front end, giving people the space to really share. There is some interesting research that shows that in terms of mental health stigmas, and in terms of people fears of being judged, that when they can hear stories shared by another who maybe went through some kind of mental health challenge, and has navigated successfully through that, when people can see other people and hear their stories, that can actually be tremendously powerful to help break down those barriers and to help people to openly talk more. So I think hearing stories from others can be helpful. There's a time and place for that.
Lovely. Well said. Greg, you have done your fair share of listening as a psychologist for 3 decades. Why does listening take effort? Why is it tough?
Yes, I think one of the first books that I read on counselling many years ago, when I first started out, so it was probably written on parchment, advised that the less you say, the better the counsellor you are. So I've always taken that to heart, and I think to some extent it's also about focus, meaning if a person's coming to us with an issue, is the focus on them, or am I going to bring the focus back to me in some way? And really, of course, from a professional counselling perspective, the focus is on the person that's in front of you. In any day-to-day situation, if we can take a little bit of a page out of that book and say, okay, a person's coming to me, maybe I can say some things that are helpful and validating, but listening to what they're saying and showing that I'm tuning into them is going to help them trust me and possibly open up more.
Brilliant.
So that can be a hard thing to do, like Beth said, not saying too much, not jumping in with our own story, not giving advice. All of those things are actually quite challenging things to do when someone comes to us, especially if they're in a state of distress.
Yeah. Let me come to Dan with some simple listening strategies. Dan, we've spoken previously on our podcast, and I love the what you shared in that. What are simple listening skills that everyday people can use and that'd be useful for them?
Yeah. Like what Greg and Beth were saying, listening can actually be a really hard task. We all have this natural kind of first response to try and help people solve their problems, which might not always be useful. And even again, just talking about how sharing your own stories can help you connect. It can help you develop a bit of rapport. But I agree with what Beth was saying. Definitely don't lead with it. And what Greg is saying about you need to make sure in sharing that story that the reason why you're sharing it is for the benefit of the person you're trying to help, that your focus should still be on them. And in terms of the actual conversation that you're having with a person, there's some very basic skills that anyone can do that you learn in courses like counseling and psychology, and they're called the active listening skills. Two of them are called minimal encouragers and paraphrasing. So minimal encouragers are things like when you're listening to someone, just going, nodding your head, or going, oh, okay, tell me more about that. Little questions to help prompt the person, or little gestures to help prompt that person to keep talking more about something that they just said. And then that's the idea of that in active listening is identifying the key points and encouraging those points to be explored more deeply. But another part of listening is that you want to make sure that the person who's sharing with you knows that you understand what they've said. So we use things like paraphrasing or summarizing. Summarizing we usually do at the very end of a session, so it might not be useful day-to-day conversations. But paraphrasing being that, say you've just told me a short description about what's going on in your life, for me to reflect back and say, oh, okay, so it sounds like to me that what you're saying is X, Y, Z, or oh, that sounds like this to me. And that gives the person the opportunity to hear from you what you've heard from them, which gives them the opportunity to either agree with what you've just said or to disagree, which is also useful because they get to then correct your understanding. And that last bit, if you can really nail paraphrasing, you'll really help the person who's talking to you feel like they've been heard, which is obviously only the main point of listening, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it sounds like it's also acknowledging and validating as well by paraphrasing as well.
100%.
Fantastic. Yeah. Look, I talk about the 3 F's in listening to really simplify listening, and I look at things as externalizing. It's a great opportunity to externalize your concerns, and I always say, let's blow the balloon. Okay, Dan, you've seen me do this in the Let's Talk program. So, Dan, remember, I bought some balloons here. So I'm gonna just for you, mate. I'm gonna blow a balloon, and I'm gonna let's role play the 3 F's in listening. Okay, 3 F letter words in listening, and that sounds a bit controversial, but let's at least people remember this, right? And the first F letter word is ask about the facts. So that I can talk about my facts of my concern. The second one is my feelings, okay? And the third is my fears. So the facts, feelings, and fears. Usually we keep fears to the last, depending on our relationship, because not many people will come up with the fears. So let's role play this, Dan. Ask me about my facts.
All right. So Jetha, why don't you tell me what happened?
Okay. I'll tell you. Thanks for asking, Dan. That really feels like I've externalized what happened. Okay.
Okay. So then,
what's the next
can you
question?
tell me how that makes you feel?
Okay. Here we go. Oh wow. That feels so much better. I just, put my feelings outside. I was external my feelings. I feel so much better. Thank you so much, Dan.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for sharing. But another thing for you is, now that you've got it all out in front of you, what was so scary about that?
Okay, let me tell you that. Oh wow. I didn't know that. And the beauty of this is, all of a sudden, I've just, by 3 questions that Dan's asked me, I've externalized my problems, and now it's out here, and I can see it, I can see the facts, I can see the feelings, and I can see my fears, and it's outside my body. Okay, And Dan, thank you for asking me those questions. You know why? I bought this balloon especially for you, mate, because it's made me happy. Okay.
That's exactly my smile.
Beautiful. And what happens is, in most cases, and a lot of people out there are bogged. You know, they're stuck with something, and whether it be mental illness or any other thing, you know, they're stuck, and sometimes we can't get out, and we keep revving our engines with frustration, and it takes so much effort. And what Dan did was just asking those 3 simple questions, and it allowed me to blow my balloon. And I always say, if you imagine this balloon is filled with helium, what it's going to do is lift me up out of that bog. It's going to lift me up through the mud into dry ground, and all by asking 3 simple questions. Thank you, Dan. And you know what? I feel so much better. My balloon's now slowly getting smaller and smaller, and my problems is easing away because now I'm in dry ground. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide about keep in touch. So important. This is something that you know, sometimes we forget, because you know, we do give that help, and you know, we sometimes forget to keep in touch. Beth, if I can come to you, how important is keeping in touch? We've had that conversation now, and how important is keeping in touch in the case of someone who's on treatment for mental illness, or someone who's just gone through a difficult experience and needs some support? What are some of the ways we can keep in touch?
Yeah, I think it can make such a big difference for people. I you know, even just personally thinking about times when I've gone through some really hard kinds of situations, and just getting a text message from somebody say, you know, hey, I've been thinking about you, wanting to check in and see how you're doing. It can be that simple, you know. So, or just you know, a phone call, or some reaching out, or going over, you know, if you're in a workspace together, going over maybe, and just, you know, walking over and letting somebody know, hey, you know, just want to check in and see how you're doing, or you know, suggesting whatever, hey, want to meet up for lunch or socially distance, whatever it may be these days, you know, whatever's possible. But just a simple gesture, I think, of reaching out, following up, letting somebody know, hey, you're still on my mind, and I care about you, and I want to see how you're doing, you know, and that can really be incredibly supportive for people who are going through challenges.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And especially these days, Beth, I mean, there is that factor of social isolation, you know, distancing and so forth. You know, I mean, as you said, even a text message, right? That just shows that you're there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's so important, you know. And I think just sort of mentioning the importance for some people, you know, of being able to have that professional support as well.
Sure.
That can be critical when one is struggling with a mental health concern.
Absolutely.
So having outside friends and family supporting, and you know, having that mental health professional who really can offer more specific skill and guidance around a particular issue.
Yeah. I'll come back to Dan and Greg on this, but as part of the Let's Talk program, we have been running Let's Talk and Walk Everyday campaign to encourage people to talk and walk to improve their mental, physical, and social well-being. I'd like to show you guys a video of what people said about the importance of talking and walking. And when we come back, I would like to hear your thoughts about the benefits of, you know, exercise, and whether it be walking, and also incorporating nature to encourage people to talk. So I'm going to show a quick video on the Let's Talk and Walk and the feedback we got.
We're walking and talking together because it's a positive start to our day.
It's a healthy connection with others.
And for a healthy body and mind.
Because it's good for our mental health.
And also it's good for relieving stress.
We're walking and talking because conversations save lives.
And walking is a great way to start a conversation.
Because fresh air gives you more energy and a sharper mind.
Also helps you keep fit and also stay connected.
Here we are, all of us, talking and walking and spending some quality family time together.
We're walking and talking together because it's a great way to stay in touch with family and friends.
And to keep fit! Because it makes us feel better.
And we love the outdoors.
Because it's good for our health.
And the relaxing.
Because it's good for our well-being.
And also good for exercise.
It's great to talk and walk for your mental health.
And for your fitness.
We are talking and walking because I feel so rejuvenated and stress-free.
And it helps clear my mind.
And I like to walk and Ollie likes to talk.
I don't like to talk. You like to walk and talk because I like to listen because that's when we catch up on things.
We are talking and walking and sharing nice stories and good experiences from last week so we can connect together.
And to enjoy this beautiful, beautiful nature.
We are talking and walking to share our thoughts and feelings.
And to spend quality family time together.
Because we like to spend time with each other and leave all of the things that annoy us behind. And it's a great way to talk and exercise at the same time.
It's great for your mind, body and soul.
And I like to talk and walk because it helps me think and solve problems.
Because it gives us an opportunity to touch base and catch up with family and friends.
Whilst enjoying fresh air and some exercise.
We've been walking and talking together for over 20 years.
It's good for our mind, body and soul.
To get some fresh air.
And to spend time with family and to get some exercise.
We talk and walk together because it's a great way to connect.
And it's a really good way to get some fresh air into your body.
Because it's a great way to exercise and keep our minds healthy. And it's a good reason to get out of the house.
It helps us exercise our mind and body.
And enhances our well-being.
We are talking and walking because it's good for our health and well-being.
And we love being outdoors.
Because we love to stay fit and healthy. And we also enjoy the nature as well.
We enjoy talking and walking together because it helps to clear our headspace.
And it gives us an opportunity to spend quality time together.
Because we are both healthcare professionals.
And we understand the importance for both mental and physical health.
And today we're talking and walking because it's essential for your physical and mental health. And it brings people together so you're not alone.
We are walking and talking because it's good for our well-being.
And it gives us a chance to talk.
We're walking and talking because we find it liberating.
And we love doing that amongst Mother Nature.
We are talking and walking because it's a great way to connect with family and friends.
And stay healthy.
We are walking and talking because it's good for our health
and good for our mind.
Hey, I enjoy walking because I get to chat to my husband about my day, whether good or bad.
And I enjoy walking because it's great exercise.
We are talking and walking together because it's good for our well-being.
And we love being in the outdoors.
Yeehaw!
Let's talk, everyone! Let's talk, everyone!
I love seeing the video. I just puts a big smile on my face. And by the way, that cute girl is my daughter at the end, Jasmine Jade. Greg, guys, there's so much research on the benefits of exercise and being outdoors for mental well-being. How can walking in nature encourage people to talk?
Yes, I think that video in a lot of ways said it all, really. You've got the sense of connection, being in the outdoors, the fresh air, you're attending to your body's needs as well as your mind, and a sense of shared purpose. Being in nature, I'm a big fan of connecting with nature for mental well-being, often in quieter places in nature, forests, the mountains, the beach. We can experience a nice sense of peacefulness or stillness. So we can even engage in mindful walking in those places where we just go about our journey and notice what we're seeing around us, our experience, and all of those things put together can make it really helpful to be able to open up with the person we're with, or just have that shared experience with them and something to talk about at the end of a destination even. So I think nature really encourages us to enjoy our surroundings and also appreciate and open up with the people that we might be walking with.
Fantastic, Greg. Beth, Dan, Beth, I know mindfulness plays a huge role in your life. You know, your books on mindfulness, and so much resources on your website. How do you think walking and nature helps that process as well?
I know it certainly helps me. That's for sure. I think that there's something that it just really calms the nervous system. And when we can dial down that amygdala, that stress response, it allows us sometimes to be able to see things from a wider perspective, to see things in a different way. So something very soothing, I think, universally, about being in nature, that can be very powerful.
Yeah, as you said, it really gives perspective, doesn't it? And makes you feel like, wow, this is amazing. It's amazing already. Guys, we've come towards the end of our forum. A quick message from the three of you about to the people that's watching this program, and especially to those who have a mental health concern. How best can they get help, and what should they do?
So I'll sort of jump in just to say, sure. I think, well, and you obviously can talk about where you are, resources. There's a great website, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, which has some really helpful resources, videos, short videos of people sharing their own stories of their, experiences with mental health challenges. And I guess just to say this idea of therapy can feel like such a stigma or just a scary thing to do. But I think, this idea that when the challenges that we're facing are greater than the resources that we have to meet those challenges, not only can talking with a friend or a trusted person be helpful, but really seeking professional support from somebody can be immensely valuable. And just to share my own personal, experience, I spent many years of my life on and off in therapy, dealing with different things, but including I lost my mom. She died when I was 15. So I carried a lot of grief and anxiety around that, and just was so helpful to be able to have some really skilled people to help me with that. So I hope, others may, through this conversation, through the amazing work you're doing, help people to open up, to seek help. Yeah. Fantastic.
Greg, comments from you?
Yeah, look, I think it can be very hard for people to find help sometimes. Not from the perspective that the help's not there, but just from the perspective of who do I go to, who can I trust, not feeling like there's anyone in their lives that wants to know about their problems or that they want to share with. So if nothing else, I think finding someone that you can trust and starting it from there is important. And like we've covered in this talk, that could be a person in your family, friend, or a health professional, your doctor, for instance, if you have a good relationship with them. So to me, I think the take-home message is about starting that conversation with someone that you can begin to open up to and take it from there.
Fantastic. Dan?
Yeah, I agree with everything that was just said before. I'm big on the idea of community, and I think even Beth touched on this right at the very start of this, the idea that mental health makes you feel isolated or that you're alone. I'm really big on reaching out to your community and not listening to the lie that that mental health can try to convince you of, that you're alone, and that nobody out there understands. Mental health problems is such a common thing that we all kind of share, and allowing yourself in the ways that we've mentioned before about how to do it in a safe way to be a little bit vulnerable and be very selective with who you reach out to, and be practical. But for me, the biggest take-home message is to never allow what it is that you're experiencing to convince you that you're alone, ever.
Well said, Dan. And Beth, I love your. Let me acknowledge your courage to open up and talk about very briefly about your story as well. And I wanted to just share, my story. 20 years ago, as I said, I was diagnosed with OCD. It's a mental illness. And 20 years ago, things were a lot more different to what it is today. And I kept it a secret. I kept it, under the covers, and didn't really speak to that many people. And I was on Prozac, which is a medication, for a little bit, not long. But what I found, and this worked for me, is to find purpose. So I always jokingly say I chucked my Prozac to purpose. And for me, the purpose was to do this kind of work, with Let's Talk and the CCC Foundation. And my message to people listening is try and find something you really love doing, something that really brings you meaning and purpose, because that can be a really good medication for you as well. That doesn't mean you shouldn't see a professional and be on medication, but it definitely helps to give you the edge, and also to have something to look forward to, and that having that something to look forward to is such an important part of managing and overcoming mental health concern as well. So guys, as I look at the time, and as it's a near close of this forum, I would like to thank all our panel members for their time and effort. Beth, all the way from Massachusetts, thank you for your effort. Greg, thank you for your wisdom. Daniel, thank you for blowing the balloon with us. And we would love to have you again in future forums. A final message from us is, please know that you're not alone. And I think Beth said that, and Greg said that, and Daniel said that. You're not alone. I encourage family members and friends and colleagues to build that village around the person who is going through some distress right now, and support them. But also encourage the people who are going through a mental health concern or a mental health illness to reach out to family, friends, and colleagues, and also to reach out to support services in your area, in your country. But if you're living in Australia, please reach out to Lifeline, Beyond Blue, Kids Helpline, and so forth here in Australia. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Keep safe, and most importantly, keep talking.
Thank you.